Alright, so it's been just a little over a week since Fast X debuted in theaters, so that means I have a review on my channel. That means that today I'm going to rank all 11 Fast and Furious movies, from the Fast and the Furious to Fast X, including the little spin-off that we got called Hobbs and Shaw. If you don't know me, my experience with this franchise is I didn't love it when I watched 1, 9, and Hobbs and Shaw. I thought Hobbs and Shaw was good, I thought 1 was great, and 9 I didn't really like. I didn't love this franchise. But when I did my rewatch, or not rewatch, when I watched them all for the first time this year, I learned that this is my favorite, possibly my favorite movie franchise. This might have even dethroned the MCU. I just can't get enough of these movies. I love these movies. Pretty much everything on from number 9 forward, I think these are great movies that I absolutely love. So, there we go. Thank you guys for clicking on this video. Make sure to join me down below in the comment section. Tell me, what is your ranking of the Fast and Furious films? Without further ado, we are going to go ahead and get started with my Fast and the Furious ranking. In 11th place, I got Fast and Furious. The 4th film in this franchise is easily the worst for me because not only throughout the film did I start to feel just a little wary, like being like, yeah, I'm not that big of a fan of this movie so far. Or it's when the film where the franchise starts to feel like it's dragging me down. After I saw 2 and 3, I watched those back to back. Then I watched this movie and I started to feel just a little wary about this movie. I sat back and I was like, okay, I'm getting a little bored of this franchise. But I still had my fun with it. It was a fun early Fast and Furious movie. Until we get into the third act. And the third act just throws everything possibly terrible that they could at you. Instead of being an awesome twist where we learn the villain is, it's just like, yeah, here we go. You already knew this. Throw that out there. And it just makes absolutely no sense to me. It's terrible. The action isn't even that good. The final act isn't entertaining. Gal Gadot's character, I'm so glad she returned in the rest of the franchise because she was terrible in this. Everything about this final act, especially the final act, is terrible. It has the most interesting premise in the franchise. Dom goes to avenge Letty's death. How cool is that? We get Dom returning from not being in the last 2 films. We get him and Brian O'Connor being together again. How awesome is that? This has to be the film where the franchise turns around. And besides that, it just starts to be the one where it's like just another Fast and Furious film for 2/3 of it. And then the third act just completely throws everything down and decides to waste everything that they could about this potential. This is easily not only the most disappointing for me, but it's easily just the worst, and the one that if I'm forced to rewatch this, I will definitely just decide to take a nap during it, because this movie was not good. After that, number 10, I got F9, and this was only the second Fast and the Furious film that I have seen, and so it was a bit disappointing to me, and that's what made me wary about watching the rest of the franchise, because I sat back after this film, and I was like, that was it? That was what this movie was? Because this movie is not good. I rewatched it. I enjoyed it just a little bit more. I enjoyed the action pieces. Being a fan of this franchise, it made me appreciate the movie more. But besides that, this movie is not good. The film decides to focus more on Dom's past and about him having a brother and him, all of his past stuff, instead of being the fun, energetic action franchise that we want it to be. I walked into the theater to this one wanting action, more action, more action. I don't really like movies where it's constant action. That's what I wanted from this movie. And what I got was a slow burn, boring movie about Dom's past. Now, the third act is in complete reversal to number 4. I absolutely love this third act. This third act was absolutely insane. Using magnets to bring up trucks. That was very fun. But the rest of the film just decided to focus way too much on Dom's past and the brother that no one cares about. And all of that it just made me feel bored. And even like rewatching this, it makes no sense within the context of this universe. Within the context of this universe, it just makes absolutely zero sense why this is the direction they would go with this. It does not fit in the continuity. It's dumb. The movie is not very entertaining. It's definitely disappointing. It really turned me off from the franchise when I watched this as the only second movie that I have seen in this franchise. That's why it's got to be this low. And right, Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift. And this is a movie that, to me, it's definitely grown better over time. In fact, I would far separate this one from number 11 and number 10, because this movie it's good, and throughout time, it's really grown on me. I would much rather rewatch this one than rewatch the other two, but there's no help denying that this film is a very flawed film. For starters, instead of being like, if we take a look at all the other premises in this franchise, number one is a cop goes undercover to try to find out some street racers and stop them. And then number two is that same cop teams up with a guy to stop a drug runner. And even in number 4, which you know it's a wasted premise, but number 4's premise is Dom goes to avenge Letty's death. The rest of the franchise has a much better premise than this. The premise of this movie is Han teaches a kid or a teenager that looks like a 25-year-old or a 35-year-old for that matter to drift. That was the premise of this movie. And I couldn't help but feel just a little bored from this movie at the end of it. I sat back and I was like, okay, that's what we're doing in this third movie. And there's no help denying, like I said, this kid looks like a 35-year-old. You do not believe that this is a teenager in high school at this point. He looks like he's like, you know that one movie, I think Adam Sandler's in it, I don't remember what it's called, but the one movie where Adam Sandler has to go back to like school because he flunked out of a class. That's what this looks like. That's what he feels like. He's not, and he doesn't even return in the franchise. Like, what are we doing here? This is a movie that is clearly the black sheep of the franchise. Not only is it the weakest premise, but it doesn't really have any weight on the rest of the franchise. I mean, even Han's death in here is completely reversed in number 7. So, I mean, it's real weird for me that this is the movie that we got for number 3. That said, it still has its entertainment value. As thrown in there as the Yakuza plot was, I was entertained, and the third act was entertaining. I sat back and I liked the racing. I liked all the racing stuff. It got better the longer the movie went. And even though, like, it's clearly flawed, it was still enjoyable to watch. I enjoyed watching this film. I like early 2000s action movies, and this is what I got from that. And like I said, over time, it made me think, maybe number 3, I would go back and revisit that. It was a fun movie, and even though, like I said, very flawed, it was still fun, and I still would watch it again. And that's what these movies need to be, is fun. But I just can't ignore the flaws of this movie and the lack that they had. But the final scene was Dom coming in there, and I sat back and I was like, if I was born and I went to go see this movie when it first came out, I would have been jumping out of my seat. That was a cool ending. So, a fairly entertaining movie. Very flawed, though. And after number 9, we got number 8, which is The Fate of the Furious. And this movie, to me, was just, it was good. I'm going to hands down say this. I would much rather rewatch this one over rewatch any of the other movies. But if you look, and I consider 5, 6, and 7 to be their own separate trilogy. If you look at those movies, 5, 6, and 7, and then instantly after 7, where at the end of the movie, Paul Walker dies and ends a perfect ending to the franchise, why does this movie have to exist? I'm glad 8 and 9 exist, because then we wouldn't have got 10, and I love 10. But why did this movie have to exist? It feels like a TV episode. If you sit back and you watch TV, it feels like just an episode. Dom betrays a family, so he goes with this lady, and then they fight some stuff, and the lady gets away. Like a 2-part television episode. It doesn't feel like a movie. You don't really feel the stakes. You don't really feel anything. And it just, after watching it, I instantly went to work, and I sat back and I was like, that was the movie after Furious 7? That was what we got? And it just feels a little underwhelming. Now, to be fair, I am a big fan of this franchise. I'm a big fan, like a massive fan of everything from 5 on. And I did like this movie. I did like the action pieces. The action set pieces were fun. The ending battle on ice was memorable. And the movie, it has like a 2.5-hour runtime. I didn't feel the runtime. I didn't feel sitting there like, okay, how long does this movie have left? 5, 6, and 7, I do think they all 3 ran a little bit long. This movie didn't really have that. I really did think that the runtime worked. The action pieces are fun. The action, like, there's a literal scene where cars go flying from the sky. That was fun. That was entertaining. I really liked Hobbs and Shaw's chemistry throughout the movie. I do like the ending. I like how Shaw and his brother came back. The callbacks to that movie. The thing is, it's just a bit underwhelming considering that this movie came from right after Furious 7, where we had the perfect ending for this franchise, and then they decided to make this movie. That just really was underwhelming as a way. Even though the movie was still very fun and another fun addition to this franchise, it's easily the weakest coming from 5. In 7th place, we got Hobbs and Shaw. Now, this is a movie that was very fun. When I left the movie, I was very positive about it. The thing is, after time, I just realized that this is just another Fast and the Furious movie. It's just another one of those movies where characters go out there and fight, just with none of the family. Now, obviously, our two leads here, Dwayne The Rock Johnson and Jason Statham, have very excellent chemistry. Their chemistry throughout this entire movie was ridiculously fun and ridiculously energetic, and I loved it. I really was entertained by them. The action pieces are pretty great. I mean, not a lot of them were memorable. Like, I'm sitting here and I'm struggling to think about some fight scenes. I remember there was an awesome fight scene in the end. There was a truck fight scene where they're climbing on trucks, and that was really fun. And the fight scenes were just fun, and the villain was good. It was a fun Fast and the Furious movie. What special thing does it bring to the table? The characters' chemistries. That is the only special thing that we have here. There's nothing like big standout scenes. Like in Fast 5, you got the standout scene where they're dragging a safe through. That's memorable. That makes you remember the franchise. In Fast and the Furious 6, there's so many things here that really work that are memorable. In Furious 7, there's so many things that are memorable. This movie is just a Fast and the Furious film that is there. It's not super memorable. You remember some stuff from the movie. You remember that it's a fun movie, but it's not like the most memorable one of these movies. I would much rather watch anything higher on this list than this one. But when I watched it, me and my father sat down and watched it. I had fun with the movie. I think this is a solid addition to the franchise. Nothing big up. And in case you are wondering, on from Fast and the Furious 8, or The Fate of the Furious, from there on, all these movies I think are highly rewatchable. It's just little problems that I have that bring them just a little bit down. Also, starting from number 6, I'm honestly just going to come out here and say all of these movies are great. From number 6, I think I would possibly give all these movies an A or higher. These last two movies, highly rewatchable. I would much rather watch 6 up from this movie. In fact, these are some of the best action movies of all time. I love these movies. Let's get into it with number 6, which is The Fast and the Furious. If we're being honest, this movie was awesome. I love this movie. This was the first movie in the franchise I watched, instead of 9, which is duh, because it's the first movie ever in this franchise. But I really just enjoyed the movie. I will forever defend this movie as one of the best Fast and Furious films. And it sucks that there's 5 other movies better than this movie, because I so wanted this one to be one. I would just much rather rewatch those other ones ahead of this one, especially, yeah, because the other ones are like from 5, 6, 7, and all those. I would much rather watch that one. This one is perfect. It's got a complex story where Brian O'Connor is trying to infiltrate these racers, trying to find the guy who's stealing stuff, and it's really fun, and the chemistry between everybody is great. You are entertained throughout the whole movie. The set pieces are memorable. Where they're driving the cars and intercepting trucks, that is insanely fun. The thing with this movie is, it is a bit too dark for the franchise. I did feel like it goes a bit too long and like has a bit too many plot lines, but that's fine because it's a complex story that really works. It's not just turn your brain off action. This movie, I feel like, actually tried to be a good movie, and it was a good movie, technical-wise. It's not just entertaining. They do a lot of things right. You like the cast, you like the characters, you like the chemistry that they all have, you like the story, you want to watch more. And this is the movie that starts out the franchise in a very strong way, and I really did like it. Considering that this is a Point Break remake. This is not a remake, but a blatant knockoff of Point Break. And I didn't learn that until I watched Sean Chandler's video, thank you a lot, but it's a Point Break remake. And this spawns the rest of this franchise. I mean, it's not only is it entertaining, but it does a lot of things right. Unfortunately, I would much rather watch 5 Up. But when we talk about the great Fast and the Furious movies, this has to be in the conversation. 5, I got the Too Fast, Too Furious. Funny story, I was really sick. I had a lot of allergies, so I was really high off allergy medicine. My head felt real loony. I felt like I was going all over the place, and that's the best way to watch this movie is because with Roman and Brian's chemistry, they have excellent chemistry throughout there. Roman, Pierce, and Brian, this is the movie where Roman Pierce gets introduced, and I love the character from start to finish through his whole arc in the franchise. The action is very fun. The premise is very fun. The villain is absolutely dangerous, and I love the villain, and he's terrifying, and he does a lot of things right. I mean, there's a scene where he puts like a rat in a bucket and starts putting fire on it because he's going to climb inside of somebody. That scene was very scary. It was hard to watch. And I love villains who have the balls to do stuff that makes it hard to watch because you know something's going to happen. And that's what this villain did. And for me, I feel like this is the most fun movie in this franchise. It doesn't try to be big emotional journey like a lot of them are. It tries to be Brian O'Connor and Roman Pierce try to stop a drug ring. Imagine how fun that is. It's insanely fun. It's insanely entertaining. This is probably going to be the one I rewatch the most. It's like only 90 minutes long. And so it does a lot of things right to make it a very entertaining film in the franchise. Not a great film, hands down. There is some problems. But for me, it is insanely entertaining and one of the best films in this franchise. 4th place, Fast X, the newest film in this franchise, is better than a lot of these movies because it does a lot of things right and it's getting way overhated. I walked out of this movie and I was like, people don't like this movie? Why? I was genuinely shocked by how good it was. Not only the entertaining factor, but the fact that it does a lot of things right. It takes the Infinity War route, which, if you've been following my channel, I had never liked Infinity War until I started rewatching it when I became a critic, and then it became my favorite Marvel movie of all time, it became one of my favorite movies of all time, one of the most rewatchable movies of all time. But it took that route where it takes different characters off on different journeys. And I love that kind of premise because when it takes different characters off on different journeys, then it decides that if every time I get started to get bored of one journey, we go on to the next one and it's insanely entertaining and fun. On top of that, the villain in Jason Momoa is the best Fast and Furious villain that we have ever had. He was scary, dangerous, entertaining. I absolutely loved him in this movie. He really had a Joker-esque feel to him. The action set pieces, like, they're not the most memorable. Like, from 3 on, those are very memorable action sequences. They are very good. They are very entertaining. They are very great. The new cast is very good. And I cannot wrap my head around why people don't like this movie. In my head, that this is another fantastic addition to this Fast and the Furious franchise. I do think it does a lot of things right. I mean, the movie ends off on a cliffhanger to where it makes you believe that everyone is going to die. I could understand one thing, like, nobody dies. I mean, obviously, Jacob's not dead. Obviously, Gal Gadot is not dead because why would she be dead? I mean, if we're being honest, why would she be dead? She's back, obviously. But I just couldn't get out of my head why people don't like this movie. I think it's an insanely entertaining action movie with great action, great characters, great stakes, and one of the best films in this franchise. Unfortunately, the trilogy, that I call it a trilogy, is much better. And real quick, I'm going to tell you why I call this a trilogy. It's because for the first 4 movies, it's basically like the Avengers setup. It's basically like the Phase 1 of the Fast and Furious franchise, to where the Phase 1 is introducing us to all the characters. We get introduced. And in number 5 of this movie, it's basically the Avengers, to where everyone's combined in here. You get the team. And that's what it is. So I call this like the trilogy because it feels like this is where the team first started. And this is where the big arcs go through. Number 3, Furious 7. The 7th film in this franchise is easily dealt the worst hand out of all these movies for a very specific reason in Paul Walker's tragic passing. Unfortunately, he died in a car accident during the filming of this film, and so you're kind of dealt that hand. There is some problems here that are definitely not because of his passing. Like, instead of going the revenge route, which this first act is incredible, it decides to take a little detour, and now we gotta find this device to find him. It takes a complete detour, and that's a bit distracting. But besides that, this movie is insanely entertaining. It's got probably some of the best action sequences in this entire franchise, and driving cars through skyscrapers and all that. That was insanely fun. The cast is very great as well. Jason Statham is a great villain. You feel his presence throughout the movie. You love the action sequences that he is in. This movie is just, it starts out on a bang, and it never lets up. That is what I love about this franchise, is that this film was insanely entertaining. And then we head into the final scene of the movie, and I just kind of feel like Brian O'Connor's character is instantly, like, thrown out of the picture. But, like I said, terrible hand, but I still really loved him. And I loved the character, and I loved the send-off for the character, that I genuinely started crying after this film, because, I mean, it's so emotional, and it does the emotional beats really well. This is the last time I felt emotion in a Fast and the Furious film. This is where the franchise should have died, I'm gonna be honest. I mean, Fast 10, I really think Fast 10 should exist. 8, 9, they don't really need to exist. This is where the franchise should have ended, but it didn't, and I do like the other movies just a little bit. But this movie is just, no doubt, had the perfect ending and had a great action sequence. This is one of the best films in this franchise. Second, and it's really close between all three of these, just saying, I mean, easily number 7 is the weakest of this trilogy. Number 2 on this list is Fast 5. And yeah, I know, Fast and Furious 6, I do think is a little bit better, and I'll tell you about why in a few minutes. But Fast 5 is incredible. I love Fast 5. This is the franchise where it's at my low point for me. Tokyo Drift was like, okay, that was a good movie. It was okay. Number 4, I do not like 4. It's my least in the franchise. We needed a save here. We need something different. And it goes like the Avengers route, where we form the team here. We get everything, and we get the payoff from the previous 4 movies that were awesome in that way. They all have excellent chemistry. They're all very fun and entertaining. This is the film where it turns into a big action franchise, and the action is absolutely incredible. It's one of the great action movies of all time, I think. It has great action. The premise, the plot, the pacing is straightforward and fun. It does all that great. And to cap it off, the final battle of the film is them dragging us safe through the city and smashing cars. I mean, I love that stuff. This is the first time where Fast and Furious abandoned reality. And that is what is so good about this film. That it abandons reality, turns into this epic franchise, and begins off this trilogy in the best way possible. This is a flawless film for me. Fast 5 is perfect. What's even better, though, number 1 is Fast and Furious 6, and that's because we don't have to waste time setting up the characters. Instantly, we already have the characters, and they're off on another journey to stop Owen Shaw. The villain is great, Hobbs is great in this movie, the family is great, the action is great, and we finally get Letty returning. When Letty returns, that is also great. There are so many good things about this movie, from the beginning of the film to the very end. I mean, it starts off with a big action sequence, and it never lets off the gas. It is what I came here for this franchise for. I was very entertained throughout the final battle. The final battle is bringing a whole airplane down. I mean, this is where you believe that people will still die. I mean, Gal Gadot's character dies. You believe all of this throughout the film, and it just works for me. The action is memorable. The characters are memorable. And everything about this first movie, everything about this trilogy is one of the perfect trilogies, I think. And it's not even a real trilogy. I think if it ended at Fury 7, this franchise could have been the best franchise of all time. It's one of my favorites. I love this franchise, in case you cannot tell. That was my ranking. I want to know yours down below in the comment section. Stay tuned for a couple of days. I finished the Evil Dead franchise. That'll be my next video, that ranking. Then I will have a tier list of all the Fast and Furious characters coming up in a couple of days. And then after that, on my second channel, I'm going to do a Fast and Furious villains ranked. And so I have some more Fast and Furious videos coming to you guys. But thank you guys for clicking on this video. And with that said, subscribe to join the Nerd Army. Peace out.